All right, we're going to start. We're on page 145 in the packets. And we're just going to go over a few lines that we started with last week. And I'm going to remind you the subject. It's been a winding kind of flitting from subject to subject because it starts with Shabbat laws, and then we talked a bit, and I won't even go through the connection, but we talked a bit about what the mood of a teacher should be in teaching a class. Last week we even had this thing about telling a few jokes before you start a lecture, but they weren't so sure about that. Maybe the teacher should have a sense of awe and reverence and anxiety even, and trying to figure out what emotions are appropriate for studying Torah. Anyway, it leads us to, as long as we're on the subject of the mood of a teacher, the moods of great teachers, it leads us to an exemplar of a Jewish teacher, Hillel, and the mood that he aspired to, and therefore becomes our aspiration, which is patience and humility. So a series of stories about trying to get Hillel to lose his temper, and now a series of stories that compares Hillel to Shammai, who was his study partner and also antagonist in the time of the Talmud. So page 145, and these are stories about how you treat people that are converting to Judaism. One is very famous, the others aren't as famous. So page 145 at the top. Tano Rabbanon, Maaseh b'goy echad sheba lifnei Shammai. So a story of a non-Jew, a goy, but not in the pejorative, a non-Jew, came before Shammai. Amar lo kama Torah yesh lachem, and said, how many Torahs do you guys got? I hear about these different Torahs. How many Torahs are there? And Amar lo shtaim, he says, we have two. This is the classic understanding of the Torah in Judaism, rabbinic Judaism. We have two. Torah shebichtav, the written Torah, which is the Tanakh, scripture. V'Torah sheba'al peh, but we also have the oral Torah, the Midrash, the Mishnah, the Talmud. Even though this is in the Talmud, they already had a concept of the oral Torah while they were composing the Torah, the interpretations of the Torah, which was oral at the time. Amar lo, shebichtav ani mamincha. So the non-Jew says, okay, I accept the written Torah, scripture. I accept that because it's there in front of me. I can see it. I can read it. V'sheba'al peh, but this oral stuff, where you guys tell me what it means, and also they're already aware. I mean, this is a parody of sorts because they're aware of the sort of fanciful interpretations that come through the oral Torah. So that oral Torah, eini mamincha. I don't believe in that at all. So, and the implication is, I'll be Jewish, but don't throw the oral Torah at me because to them it seems so uncertain. And in some ways wild and untamed. You just come up with these crazy interpretations. So I'm not going to accept that. Gayarani almanat shetilamdeni Torah shebichtav. Convert me on the condition that you just stick to the written Torah. Because I don't go along with the oral Torah. Ga'arbo v'hotzio b'nazifa. Shammai got angry at him and kicked him out angrily. Okay, you're wasting my time. I don't know. He's detecting some mockery in this guy, or he doesn't want to waste his time with, if you don't get that there needs to be an oral Torah, I'm not wasting my time with you. Just get out of my office. Ba lifnei Hillel. So he goes to Hillel, who's the other great rabbi of the day, and gets right to the point. And Hillel, gayare. Hillel converts him. So this is the difference between Hillel and Shammai. Shammai kicks him out angrily, but Hillel converts him. It's amazing. Okay, you're a Jew. It doesn't say how. I mean, let's say he goes through the halachic process. Okay, he has a circumcision, but the Talmud doesn't tell us the details. What it tells us is right away. No questions asked. Doesn't seem to be. You're a Jew. Gayare Yoma Kama. So now they're studying together. Okay, are they studying together before or after the conversion? The presumption seems to be it's after the conversion. So he converts him, and he convinces him to continue studying. Gayare Yoma Kama. One day, Amarle is teaching him. Hillel's teaching him Aleph Bet Gimel Daled, just teaching him the Aleph Bet because you start from the beginning. This is sort of written Torah because the Torah is in Hebrew and it's the Aleph Bet. L'machar afachle, but the next day he tells him the Aleph Bet, but he switches it. He reverses it. So he starts from Taf Shin. So remember yesterday I said that it's Aleph Bet Gimel. Now he says Taf Shin. So the Amarle v'had mol lo amarti lihachi. And the convert says to him, wait a second, yesterday you told me exactly the opposite. And now you're telling me something else. Amarle, lav al didik hasamach. So Hillel's trying to make a point. So, well, yesterday you relied on my oral instruction. I taught you, and you trusted what I was saying. I mean, how do you even know what the Aleph Bet is? At some point, everything needs an interpretation. You'll see that this actually very deep point flows through, becomes a thread in the rest of the stories. But he's saying everything needs an interpretation, even something as simple as the order of the letters. At some point, you do have to rely on teachers to understand and interpret to you. De'al peh nami samach alai. So yesterday you relied on my oral instruction. Today also, you need to rely on my oral instruction. And in fact, oral instruction is key. It's essential to understanding any text at all, but especially the Torah. So that's the point he makes. So actually, we learned two very important things there. Actually, we learn a lot. Well, after the end of this, we'll reflect on all this. But so one is that Hillel is very patient. That seems to be one main point here. Is even though the non-Jew comes with a ridiculous demand, a conditional conversion, you convert me, and I only want to know half of it. Nevertheless, Hillel is patient, brings him along, and ultimately convinces him to accept the whole thing. But also, Hillel explains what the purpose of oral Torah is. Shammai can't be bothered to even explain that. Shammai says, if I need to explain it to you, then you don't get it. So why should I waste my time?
This is sort of written to show you that Shammai is not a very good rabbi.
I don't know.
No, it sounds like
I don't know why it's written. Why are these stories here? I don't know. Let's talk about that later. There's lots of reasons. Let me just say I disagree that the point is to show that Shammai is not a very good rabbi. Okay. I think you could easily understand these stories as being somewhat sympathetic to Shammai. And I'm going to ask you to do that. So to put yourself in Shammai's shoes. After a lifetime of studying these stories, I'm starting to get sympathetic to Shammai. Maybe that's just me. But I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure I think for sure Hillel's a hero. I'm not so sure that Shammai's a villain necessarily, and it's something we'll want to talk about. Yeah.
I think one thing it shows is what a good teacher Hillel is, because the example that he uses is very simple.
Yeah, right. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, right. Yeah.
Right. It's not hard to understand.
Yeah.
But the message is not a simple message.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And so what you're saying is it's telling us what a good teacher Hillel is, but it's also telling us about good pedagogic methods.
Correct.
What makes good teaching? Or let's say what makes Jewish teaching.
But there also must have been strands of Judaism at the time who wanted that interpretation exactly. Because the Karaites, for example, many generations later.
Yeah. I mean, the Karaites are sort of floating above this. So the Karaites are people that actually reject the oral Torah.
That's right.
They lose patience with these fancy interpretations. And by the way, they're not so far distant in time. I mean, the Karaites, they don't exist yet, but it's like the year 700, the Karaites.
Right.
That's when we first hear about them. And but probably there was a kind of Karaism, proto-Karaism that was already floating around.
Back then.
Sure.
Right, because this is a very creative period. The rabbis, had lots of interesting creative midrashim, so you figure there had to have been a pushback. Like, wait, hey, hang on a second.
The ascendancy of the rabbinate is really critical at this particular
this is happening now, right?
That's the point.
Right, so part of this is just justifying what the rabbis do. All right, let's keep going. Shuv ma'aseh b'goy echad. So we find out this is another non-Jew who wants to convert. Sheba lifnei Shammai. Comes to Shammai first. Amarlo, Gayareni almanat, shetilamdeni kol haTorah kula, kishani omed al regel echad. This is the famous story. Most people have heard the story. What we don't realize is we often quote the story out of context. This is now the full context of it. So the non-Jew comes to Shammai and says, convert me on condition that you teach me all of Torah while I am standing on one foot. So the challenge is not for the teacher to stand on one foot, although that's pretty difficult to do, but the convert is standing on one foot. I don't know if that changes it for you or not, but it's not a very long period of time. You can try it. It's not 5 seconds, but you would need a little more time to get the entirety of Torah, which he says, kol haTorah. I want to know all of Torah, and while I'm standing on one foot. All right, so it first comes to Shammai, Dechafo be'emet habinyan b'shibiyado. So Shammai basically what this means is he hits him with his ruler. Shammai was an architect. They all had jobs.
Right.
So Shammai was an architect, and he had a kind of architect's tool, which I think we would just define as a ruler, and he just smacks him in the face with the ruler. Short and sweet. Pushed him over. Hit him, smacked him. There's all sorts of ways to translate this, okay? So that doesn't take very long. Right. So you're looking at me. So is Shammai not a villain? I'll get to that. Anyway, Ba'alifnei Hillel. So he comes to Hillel. Gayare. So Hillel converts him. So it's interesting. So what does that mean? Does he convert him right away, or does he teach him Torah right away? I don't know. We'll talk about it later. But the first thing is, of course, it's exactly the opposite of Shammai, who pushes him away, literally hits him away, knocks him away. Hillel doesn't, and then he gives him the principle, which we've all heard, right? But we'll read it. Amarlo da'alach sine. Speaking in Aramaic, suddenly that came up last week. Why do they sometimes shift to Aramaic, to Hebrew? If you want, I'll go over that later. But this is Aramaic. So what is hateful to you, lechavarcha, to your chaver, it's very similar, to your chaver, la ta'aved, don't do. So what's hateful to you, don't do to your fellow human being. Chaver meaning friend, but also your fellow human being. All right, so all of this is important. We very often focus only on that statement. What's hateful to you, don't do it to others. But he also says, Zohi kola Torah kula. That's the whole Torah. That's the whole Torah. V'idach perusha. But the rest, and this is important because he says this, the rest is a commentary. But what did we just learn from the previous? Right, the previous story is that the commentary is very important because the commentary is the oral Torah. Right. So he's sneaky here. He's telling him the whole Torah is what's hateful to you, don't do to other people. But he says there's more to it. But we've already learned the more to it is essential. So the rest is commentary. And then the last is important too. Zeal Gemor. So go and study. Gemor means study, but also it's a play on words. Gemor means finish, like ligmor. So go and finish, like you're not done. It's a freighted statement. There's a lot more to it. So clearly, what's hateful to you, don't do to others is beautiful and important, and it becomes a very important Jewish ethic. I'm suggesting the others are just as important. The rest is commentary, and we've learned that commentary is very important, and also the go and study. The go and study is on your own. Try to finish the thought, flesh it out. Don't be satisfied with a slogan. I threw a slogan at you. It's an important slogan. It is. It's a good place to start. But it's by no means the end. The end is up to you. Go and study. Yeah.
But couldn't one say the commentary is the rest of the Torah?
Yeah.
Not the oral.
Yeah. Oh, I see. It's the written Torah?
Yeah.
Yeah, except that he says V'idach perusha. The rest is commentary. As soon as he uses the word commentary, we're in the land of midrash, of oral Torah.
Yeah, oral.
Of oral Torah. Yeah. So when the rest is commentaries, and there's a series of commentaries about this. There's ways you can understand it, and you could see that too. You've got to you can't totally live by this. You have to figure out examples. And you're going to come up with borderline cases that you're going to have to decide one way or another, and you're going to need to think about this. Basically, what he's saying, I need you to think more, to think through this, using examples, and understanding it, and studying more, and you're going to need help with that, and you're going to need to read other things. Yeah.
Seems like any religion could make that statement.
Yeah, sure.
But I don't know.
No, I think it's a statement. No, it's
Jewish.
Oh, you mean what's hateful to you, don't do to others.
And the rest is commentary.
Well, the rest is commentary. I would say what we're learning here is that's. So no, I don't think it's just the Torah, it's just Judaism. It's Hillel's theory of significant thought. Anything that's significant, any significant life teaching is going to require thought and work and commentary. I can't give it to you in slogans. I know you want it in slogans, so I'll throw out a slogan to you, but there needs to be more. There needs to be this oral Torah. Now, would every religion come up with that concise statement? What's hateful to you, don't do to others. I doubt it. I think every religion would have its own take on that. So there's hints of Ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself, the golden rule in Christianity. Yeah. So he does. What he doesn't say is almost as interesting as what he does say, because Rabbi Akiva says it's all about love your neighbor as yourself. Hillel's obviously thought about this and says, I would put it this way: what's hateful to you, don't do to other people. And there's a significant difference. Yeah. We don't have to go into that now, but you understand there's a significant difference. The way Jesus phrases it is also very different, and then the religions go in separate directions. Yeah.
I think one interesting aspect is the go study.
Yeah,
because I don't
really
think
important.
every religion emphasizes
Makes
the go
that,
study
right.
part. as much as Judaism.
Right. Yeah.
And for the common man.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Maybe the religious leader is supposed to study, but
no, he's to go study. I want you to take responsibility now, because what Hillel
studying.
We're still studying. Right. But the responsibility becomes on the student.
Right.
So Hillel doesn't say, "Come on now, I'm going to tell you everything."
Right.
It's you have to put in the intellectual effort. If you're not putting in the intellectual effort yourself, critically and thinking about it, you're not getting it. That's the Zeal Gemor. It's really, because otherwise he could just say, look, here's how you keep kosher. Here's how you separate your dishes. Here's the time you have to light Shabbos candles. Just memorize that and you're done. But he doesn't. He says, you go and study. You put in the intellectual effort. Don't just have someone tell you what to do, because then you won't get it. Yeah.
Why do you think he puts it in the negative? Don't what's hateful to you, as opposed to do unto others.
Why do you think?
Because it wasn't expressed that way before.
There's a tendency to go in that direction anyhow. And that's where you want to put the limit.
Obviously he did it consciously. He was aware of love your neighbor as yourself, which is in the Torah. Was he aware of Jesus? Who knows? I'm not going to go into that. Or Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva comes later, so it wouldn't have been Rabbi Akiva. But Rabbi Akiva says that's the main principle. One thing I'll say, because we could get bogged down in this for a long time. Maybe we should. I don't know. But it's a pessimistic way of phrasing it. Like, it's much more inspiring to say love your neighbor. So maybe it's not so much that Hillel is a pessimist, but more realistic. It's more realistic human behavior to withhold hateful acts than to go around loving everybody. I can't go around loving everybody, but I can get in. I know what's hateful to me, and I can avoid that. And maybe that's it. Maybe he feels like that's a more realistic model for human behavior. Maybe it's more Jewish. Maybe he's trying to differentiate himself from early Christianity, which is loving everybody. We're just going to love you to death. That's what we're about. Loving you, converting you. This is more like, I'm going to leave you alone, and we're going to leave you alone, and that's an important ethic. So 1, 2, yeah, Martha.
So for me, the way I think of it is, if it's love your neighbor as yourself and do unto others as you, then you're the one who's in control. If I love ham sandwiches, I'm going to give you a ham sandwich.
Yeah, that's really good. You're right.
But if it's don't do unto others what's hateful to you, it's hateful to me to have somebody tell me what to eat. So I'm not going to tell Yanko what to eat.
Right. So that's the again, it's not so much pessimistic as realistic, and maybe it's a higher morality, really, too, to understand what really damages other people, what damages me. Sure.
I think part of it is because there's one of my teachers was talking about this last week, that we have a natural inclination to Yetzer Hara.
Yeah.
And because that is evil inclination.
Yeah.
So that's like the default.
Right.
So we have to fight against what would normally be what we would.
Right.
What is the default?
Right. Yeah. It's also, this is the pessimistic side of it. He says to be human is a struggle against doing hateful things, the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, and to really succeed in the noble quest of a human being is to struggle against that. And once you've done, and that's Judaism. That's what he would say. It's not so much finding the greatness in you and loving, but it's framed in the negative. It's fighting against your evil inclination, and that will make you succeed as a human being. So again, there's different ways of sort of approaching the idea.
Confirms that by the number of mitzvahs that are the do not do's.
There's more. there are more. So there are more do nots than there are do's. So Hill is looking at those do nots and thinking, this is real nobility here. The fact that I can withhold, that even though I want to, I don't. All right. So let's go on, because I want to get the whole context of these encounters with the converts and the contrast between Hillel and Shammai. So there's another one. And again, these are not as famous. In many ways, they're just as interesting. Shuv Maseh B'Goy Echad. So again, another, and again, we find out these are separate individuals. So another non-Jew, Shaya Over Achure Beit HaMidrash. And he was just walking past a Beit Midrash, a house of study. V'shama kol sofer, and there was a sofer there. Sofer there in that context means teacher, not what we think of a sofer. He probably did that too, but the scribes were also teachers in those days, not as high a rank as a rabbi. Not every Beit Midrash had a rabbi, but there was a sofer there, which is a teacher, a good teacher. Shahaya Omer, and he was teaching. So he was teaching these verses. Ve'ela bagadim shayasu choshen va'ephod. So this is a quote. These are the garments which they make. This is, of course, from Exodus. The girdle and the choshen is the breastplate. Okay, so they're discussing. This is one of the fascinating Torah readings where all they do is discuss the accoutrements of the priests in the temple in the desert. So, but that catches his attention. The non-Jew, Amarlu, halalu lemi. So he kind of joins in the discussion and says, well, who gets to wear those things? Those sound cool. Like, who wears those things? Amrulo. So they answered him, the Jews in the Beit Midrash answer, Kohen Gadol, the high priest. The high priest gets to wear those things. Amar oto goy be'atzmo. So the non-Jew says to himself, Elech ve'et gayer, I will go and convert. Bishvil, so yesimuni Kohen Gadol. I'll convert so they make me a high priest. And then I'll get to wear those things. Who knows why people convert? His motivation is fashion. Jews get to wear these amazing clothes. Yeah, and there's a picture of it right there. So, like, who wouldn't want to convert when you see clothing like that? This guy's a fashion plate. So he wants to convert so he can become a high priest. But what's interesting is the high priest isn't so important to him. It's the clothing. He wants to wear clothing. Now, is this meant to be funny? Probably it is. It's a little funny. It reminds me of that Seinfeld episode, this famous Seinfeld episode, where that guy wants to convert because of the jokes. Oh. He's a dentist, and he's a dentist and an anti-dentite, and in the end he tells Seinfeld, tells Jerry that he wants to convert because of the jokes. Like, Jews are so funny, so he wants to convert. So this guy wants to convert because of the clothes. Who knows why? I mean, it's really an interesting sort of test of motivation. How deeply do we look into the motivation of people to convert? And this is a live issue still today. So this guy, he phrases it himself. I want to convert so I can wear those things. Yeah.
That's a good commentary on the human condition.
Yeah.
What motivates people is very different.
Yeah.
And the rule for society, I mean, the Japanese sort of live by this, don't do unto others what is hateful to you.
Yeah.
They couldn't live in that small, tight island without rules like that.
Yeah, it's interesting, yeah. Yeah, it's a village kind of, a small village sort of rule.
I mean, it's a commentary on social life.
Right, it is, yeah. Okay, so let's see. So now he's got to convert. Ba'alifnei Shammai. These guys all go to Shammai first.
The word would get around.
I know, you would think by now, like especially if he's holding a ruler in his hand. It's just not. So, Ba'alifnei Shammai. Amarle, and he says to them, Gayarani almanat shetisimeni Kohen Gadol. Convert me on condition that afterwards you make me the high priest. And I think the idea is, like, he doesn't know who the high priest is. He just knows about the clothes. So he doesn't know I have to become Jewish to become a high priest. So first I'll become Jewish, and then I'll get to wear the clothes. So he goes to Shammai. He hits him with the ruler. So really, I mean, by this time you understand, like, if Shammai's holding a ruler and you want to convert, but he hits him with the ruler. Okay, Ba'alifnei Hillel, Gaire. He converts him. Hillel's really the model here. I mean, so there's a lot of interesting things going on. How deeply do you look into motivation? Do you understand that motivations also can change? So if this is the motivation he starts with, maybe it's not the motivation he's going to end with. That's the challenge Hillel has. Hillel encounters these people where they're at, which is a very superficial level. I just want this little.
The connecting link is.
Yeah. So he holds on to that. That's sort of classic outreach for him too. Right. There's reasons why from Hillel's past why he wants to bring people in, which we can go into later, but maybe next week. But anyhow, this to me is the most amazing. It's not that, because we all know. So we're reading the Talmud. We know nobody can be a high priest. Right? You can't just I can't become a high priest. I was born Jewish. It's a lineage, and only one person, that's born into it can become a high priest. And you would think that Hillel would just tell him right off. Right. So Hillel is so liberal in his thinking is that's your motivation. That's all I need to hear is you want to be Jewish. Even if what you're asking as a condition is an impossibility, it doesn't matter. I'm going to take you where you're at, and I'll make you Jewish.
What would today's orthodoxy say?
He's in the Talmud. I mean, what's interesting is that you would think, you would think because of these stories, we would have a very open door policy when it comes to converts. And what happens over history is exactly the opposite. And we should understand why that is. That's why I say I'm not so sure that Hillel is the role model here.
But was that so?
I'm not so sure Shammai is either. I mean, the way we've read these stories over the hundreds of years is, I don't know, we shift and think. I'd like you, as we read the stories, also to give a sympathetic ear, at least, to what Shammai's going through, and understand that. I don't approve of the hitting, but
in biblical times, was it
not
so
necessarily so. When I went to the yeshiva, and if you didn't get it right,
there were rulers.
We had a rabbi with a cane.
So there's a generational thing, though. Yeah, right. No, I'm actually not so young. I mean, I had a teacher. This was a French teacher who carried a belt with him, and he would. So yeah. I mean, that's within our lifetimes where you had corporal punishment for. So yeah. So that's a cultural, generational thing. But the idea that Shammai feels like these people are wasting his time and maybe mocking him, and that you do have to probe into motivations, though those aren't illegitimate. His response, I think, strikes us as awful because of the hitting, but that's cultural. It is. I mean, that's yeah.
In biblical times, is it as difficult to convert as it is to the Orthodoxy regulations today?
Probably not. There's very little that we know about it. I think you married in and you were in.
Jews were actively proselytizing until, let's say, Constantine or something like that.
There was a period where Jews were proselytizing. Mostly they weren't. I mean, these are, well, you know what I want to do, because we only have 2 minutes left, is just finish this paragraph, and the next week we'll have like a broader discussion about the whole thing. All right, Marlo. All right, so now Hillel is talking to him, and teaching him, so that he manages to get the guy to continue with the teaching. Klum amidi melech elam mishi yodea tachsisei malchut, and he says to him, would you make somebody a ruler without knowing what is it that a ruler needs to do? The rules of ruling, what the constitution for the king. Lech lemod tachsitei malchut. All right, so now what you have to do is kind of learn exactly what it means to be a ruler. Halach v'kara. Okay, so then he picks up the book of Exodus and he's reading it. He goes and he studies. Kevan shegia v'hazar hakarev yumat. So he gets to this one particular verse, which means a non-priest, any non-priest. By the way, understanding that, including a born Jew. So a non-priest who comes close to the holy precincts should die. So suddenly realize, well, I don't think I can ever become a high priest. In fact, if I even try to get close to the temple, I'll die. Amarle mikraze al mine amar. So he goes to his teacher Hillel and says, well, who's this about? This word zar. A Jew that can't even come close to the temple, let alone being a priest. Amarlo afilo al David melech. It's even afilo al David melech Israel. Even King David wasn't allowed to go into the Holy of Holies in the temple. So he couldn't do what a priest could do. Nasa otoger kal v'chomer ba'atzmo. This is really interesting. So the ger now, who's Jewish, right? So the convert does a kal v'chomer. So a kal v'chomer is a strategy of reason. He reasons to himself. What's interesting is it's a Jewish way of reasoning. It's a Talmudic way of reasoning. So he's already become Jewish in his thinking, even though he hasn't learned all of Torah. He hasn't learned very much at all. But his method of learning has gotten through. So in some ways, that's also teaching us that it's a way of thinking, as in addition to a bunch of details, but it's also a way of thinking. So he does this. It's reasoning from a major to a minor, and this is his reasoning. Uma Yisrael shenikru banim lamakom. So just as Jews who are referred to as children of God, umitoch ava she'avam kara lahem b'ni b'chor Yisrael, and because of this love, which God loves them, they are called the firstborn of Israel. Ketiv alehem v'azara karev yumat. But for the children of Israel, who God loves, even they can't get close to the temple. Ger, so a convert who isn't born Jewish, hakal shebab maklo v'tamirlo, a poor convert, alachat kama v'chama. So a poor convert, of course, could never actually become high priest. A born Jew, David the king, can't become high priest, so of course I can't become high priest. So actually, he reasons it on his own, and so then he figures it out, and then he's happy. He's a happy Jew, happy ending.
Is that a commentary against conversion to Christianity? To Christianity.
So why is that?
Because they take on the position of being the new Israel.
Oh, I see. Right.
And this is a way of disowning that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Yes, because Christianity, we are the firstborn. We are the beloved of God.
Precisely.
So he says all Jews are the beloved of God. Yeah. And of course, the end point is that Hillel converted him, was patient with him, allowed him to come to the conclusion on his own, and now you've got a happy Jew, who wasn't rejected, and it wasn't rejected not from converting, and not even from being high priest. Hillel just says, okay, come in, let's learn together, and then figures out on his own that he can't be a high priest. Okay, so what you end up with these three stories are three happy Jews who would have been rejected by Shammai, in fact, are accepted by Hillel, and had to come to a lot on their own. And we have stories you'll see about what happens to these three too. So, all right, we're going to stop here.